Hi guys, Joe here, and welcome to 750 Gaming. In this one, we're talking about tanks. Alright, well, welcome back. I haven't done a video for a good couple of months. It is what it is. As I've said before, I don't do this YouTube thing for a living, I just kind of do it for fun and as another expression of my hobby journey. And it turns out, over the last couple of months, I haven't really done anything, so there's not really been anything to do a video about. But in amongst all the other stuff of life, the universe and everything, I did start some work on my my Astra Militarum project. It's been long overdue, and to be honest, I'm kind of content that it might not get finished until maybe the next edition of 40k, but started it now has been. I wrote a 1,000 point army list for a light, street fightery, special ops, urban conflict, local militia but highly mobile Astra Militarum force. And I'll do a proper video on all my thinkings and workings out on that in due course. Probably. One thing's for sure, it's gonna be expensive, right? Life is busy, plastic ain't cheap, horde armies just take a lot more resource. Making 1,000 points of relatively elite Space Marines is expensive enough these days. So, regardless of when this army gets finished, or whether I include official Games Workshop plastic or various other proxy models, because let's face it, I ain't going anywhere officially Games Workshop with any of these armies, so nothing needs to be Games Workshop official. But either way, it's going to be a lot of minis, which often means a lot of dollar. Or does it? Yeah. It does. It does mean that. But anyway, onto these tanks I want to talk about and how I'm trying to get it to cost a little bit less. Now, the Astra Militarum are of course known for their meat grind tactics with their infantry, but they've also got the big guns that never tire, so it stems to reason that my army would have tanks. As I say, my theme is modern urban street fighter, local but professional militia type aesthetic, albeit in desert type camo, because, I don't know, desert world or something. But yeah, we're going to be highly mobile, that's the intention, so we're going to need some sort of armoured personnel carrier. Now, of course, the G-Dubs Chimera is one of those classic kits that has stood the test of time, and I actually have very little issue with it. Except, I kind of want my APCs to have wheels as opposed to tracks. Now, of course, I could just bash some Chimeras or indeed some Tauroxes, but I don't want to pay the G-Dubs tax just to bash all those models apart. So, third-party tanks it's gonna be then. Alright, let's just cut to the chase. I didn't like any of the options immediately available, so I loaded up some old-school SketchUp software and designed my own. Bam, there we go, disclaimer, full disclosure, done. But you know what? I went deep. I started with just an APC, but then I remembered all those other guard tanks that use the Chimera chassis, and so I kind of went to town modelling interchangeable parts here, there and everywhere. And so what I have is this main chassis with wheels, and I've deliberately modelled these as sub-assemblies for two reasons. The first is printability, or rather print flexibility, and the second is, well, I like wheels, but tastes differ and tastes change. I might go back to these models one day and model the sides with tracks in the future for a different aesthetic. But at least there's a way of doing that and future-proofing some of the interchangeability options and c'est la vie. So yes, main chassis with wheels. Now, I've printed these in a black filament, but I've given them a heavy xenophil for the purposes of this video so you can see the definition, etc. But colour doesn't really matter here. The main chassis here has a hull weapon mount, and it has a mount for either a turret or a hatch thing. For the hull weapon, I've modelled a heavy gun type proxy and a flamethrower thing. For the turret, I've modelled heavy guns again, a flamethrower thing, and a laser cannon. And you can call them what you will depending on what rule set you're playing in and what you want them to be. And then there's this big block to go on the back here as your personnel transport bit. And so that's the APC, codename Mule, for, pack horse reasons. Now I've also modelled a bigger flamethrower type turret weapon and a massive fuel tank type attachment to go on the back. It could fire flames, it could disperse horrible chemicals, it could shoot high-powered water jets as your favourite European football hooligans. You do you. And I've chosen to name this thing Cobra, because it, spits venom or something. And then there's your long-range ordnance deliverers. Now, the first is my take on a mobile rocket launcher, and I've modelled it somewhat on some of those actual real-world mobile surface-to-air missile launcher things. And I've modelled it in two parts so that you can adjust your angle of attack, should you wish. And I must quickly just mention that I've modelled everything with slots already in for magnets and things. You might need to re-drill or widen some of those holes depending on your preference of magnet and the desired strength of hold. Of course, you might just want to glue it all together. You do you. Anyway, this thing is called the Falcon launcher. I figure it could proxy as surface-to-air missiles, anti-aircraft weaponry, or longer-range surface-to-surface, depending again on your rule set, scenario, and whatever you want to list it as. If you've ever seen a peregrine falcon hunt, it's pretty gnarly, catching stuff in the air and the ground, and I figured as this could proxy as multiple different tanks with multiple different targets, Falcon was kind of appropriate. And then there's the Albatross, a long-range mobile field ordnance bombardment cannon thing. I've modelled this in sub-assembly for easier printability, but again the angle of the gun can be controlled by magnets if you desire, or if you just want to you can glue the whole thing up again. But if you do magnetise the cannon-y bit, you can actually take it out and put it back in again, which might make it easier to store and transport, but whatever you do, just ignore my wonky gluing here on the barrel and do a better job than I have. Now, I printed all my bits out on an Elegoo Neptune 4 Pro FDM printer. It isn't my Neptune 4 Pro, but it's what I have access to. The settings took a bit of trial and error, as did the orientation of the prints and things, and I'm still kind of learning all this stuff out as I go along, but I'm reasonably happy with what I've managed to model and print for my purposes. You've likely got access to a different printer to me. Maybe you've got one of those Bamboo Lab A1s that are all the rage at the minute. But you'll likely know better than I what settings you need to use to make yours work. That being said, on the Neptune 4 Pro, I've been using the Elegoo SKU of Ultimaker's Cura software to slice my STLs, and I've been using the fine detail stock settings with a few modifications. I slowed down the speed of the initial layers to give me a solid bit of bed adhesion, and where I've used support, I've adjusted a support Z distance, which allows the supports to be removed a little bit easier from underneath. I've used the standard auto tree supports that the software generates when slicing, and I found them to be okay for the most part as long as I've got my orientation right. And I've been using the standard 0.4mm nozzle that the printer came with, and actually I'm pretty happy with the results. Your mileage may vary depending on what printer you have access to, of course. But the main point really is that FDM printers are getting cheaper and better these days, and are both easier and cleaner to use than resin printers. And honestly, the actual main reason I don't have one of my own is because I've been able to use this one I have at my workplace, and therefore I haven't needed to carve out space in my house for one of my own. Yet. Although I plan to, of course. And if anyone from Elegoo or Bamboo Lab or Creality or anyone else for that matter should ever feel inclined to chuck a 3D printer at me for testing and to improve upon these settings and rate your gear properly, then, my hands are wide open. Because if you don't ask, you don't get. Right? No. Anyway, As I say, I'm fortunate enough to have access to software and hardware to do this, and so for all the tanks I've printed and am going to print, all I'm shelling out is around 18 quid for my own reel of black PLA filament. Now for the infantry. Another time. But there you go. 4 tanks, or rather 4 different configurations of tank-like vehicles that might fit your desired aesthetic, ready for any 28, 32mm-ish scale tabletop wargame that you might know and love. And I'm going to pop a link in the description below to the package on MyMiniFactory where you can download these STLs if you fancy. They aren't going to be on public display, you'll only be able to get them via this link below, and they aren't particularly highly detailed, and they aren't pre-supported, but they are free for you to do with what you want, within reason. Because, yeah, this is just a bit of fun for me, really. That being said, if anyone did feel so inclined to donate a little bit of pocket change my way, I won't argue with you, and there'll also be a link to my Buy Me a Coffee page below too, and I'll be grateful. Of course I will. But that's that. Let me know what you think. I'm constantly tinkering these days with CAD to do other bits and pieces, and I'm still hobbying proper, albeit very slowly. My kids have kind of lost interest in the combat patrol we were putting together, so that's on hiatus at the mo, but there's this guard project to crawl through now, and a few other things in the mixer, and as and when I also want to start on model railway, but yeah, that's another rabbit hole altogether. Yeah, there you go. Anyway, see you next time. And as ever, thanks for watching. Let's go! Yes, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this content, then do hit like and give me a comment below. I don't do this to pay my bills, it's just for fun without a regular release schedule or anything. So hit subscribe to catch these videos when I do them, or visit my Instagram for my hobbying updates. My content isn't monetized, I have no Patreon, but if you want to tip the busker by chucking some pennies in the digital hat, then I have a buy me a coffee thing set up and I'll be very grateful. See you next time.